This is Marriage on the Half Shell, Raw and Exposed. We sat here for a couple minutes trying to come up with a title for this one. So what we came up with was baggage check, not the airport kind, because tonight we're going to be discussing baggage that you would bring into a relationship and how to deal with it.
Or at least how
we dealt with it.
we deal with it.
Yes.
Yes.
So we're hoping that this will possibly help some other people to A, recognize their baggage, and B, maybe we can give you some tools, to kind of navigate.
I mean, we'll mention some things that did not work for you.
Yes.
For instance, but may work for others.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be we'll get into the
right
discernment of that. So shall we?
Yeah, but before we get started, I have to share just a little anecdote here. I get a call from my dad today, and he will listen to our podcast from time to time. And he had listened to one, I don't know which one he listened to, but he said he was feeling bad because of some of the things that I'd been through. And, I had to explain to him that that's never been my intention.
No.
To make him feel like I was blaming him for anything that happened to me in my life, right?
Right.
That's never been I've never want to do that. And, we've discussed before, like Dad and Sherry, my stepmother, they've been our primary examples of how to do marriage and how to do it right. And, they've been married, God, I think about 10 years longer than we have. So
sounds right.
Yeah. And, if anything, because they've provided such a good example, then our marriage, we stayed committed, and we're thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've married off 5 out of 6 of our kids who are also in thriving marriages, and they're the reason.
Yeah.
They're one of the big reasons that is happening the way it is.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I don't want anybody to listen to this and feel like what happened to me is their fault, because what we're going to discuss tonight is some of my trauma. I don't mean that in the generic sense or in the new definition of that word, meaning anything can be trauma.
Anything you don't like.
Yeah, anything you don't like, or somebody says something that offends you, or that's not A, it's not trauma. B, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual traumatic things that happened to me and how they shaped my life, pointed me in a certain direction, and I had to correct course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that out there.
I agree. And I'll we talked about your dad and
Yes.
Sherry, and my parents also, for me, provided the example of a good relationship. Theirs was different than your dad and Sherry's.
Well, I mean, your parents got married, stayed married.
Stayed married.
Yeah.
Were faithful to each other.
Yeah.
Until Dad passed away. Right. So we both had these good examples in our lives as we were getting married.
Right.
But coming into our marriage, there were some things that I think we're going to focus on you primarily because I didn't experience trauma.
Yeah.
Or anything, any kind of traumatic thing. And, I had to grow. I had to continue to grow. So I'm not saying I came in to our marriage perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But for tonight, we're going to focus on you or your experience, and then how we both work together to resolve it.
Right.
and keep our marriage together
Yeah.
and strong.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
So
We're going to kind of do it interview style.
I
just
guess.
So you know, just kind of, sort of.
I mean, I'll ask the question. So, okay. So let's start with just describing what your trauma was about, and then can you give me an example or two of what were traumatic experiences that you dealt with growing up,
Okay.
and and then how that affected you as you came into the marriage. That's a big, broad question.
Yeah,
first,
it is.
So
It is.
I may prompt you a little bit more, but
Okay.
go ahead and start. With that.
Well, I mean, I've described before, my parents did get divorced when I was 8, and it doesn't matter who you are. If you're a little kid and your parents get divorced, that's traumatic. It just is. And as I just explained, I'm not holding that over my dad's head. We don't even really talk about it. I mean, he repented to my mom, long time ago.
Oh.
My mom's passed away. She passed away years ago. But
And let's talk about just real quick.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an aside, but you talk about how it's traumatic for children, and a lot of people kind of think, yeah, kids are resilient and they can deal with it. It's like when you get divorced, you are, yes, they are resilient.
yes,
And they'll adapt to the situation
Right.
as best they can.
yeah,
But you are, even if it's a amicable, what they call an amicable divorce, and there's no fighting and no stuff like that, which just makes things even worse. But,
yeah,
but even if it's amicable, you're still modeling for them the fact that love doesn't last.
yeah,
And so, they're thinking, well, if they stop loving each other, then when is mom going to stop loving me? Or when
Right.
is dad going to stop loving me?
yeah,
And that's what they're getting modeled, whether you believe it or not.
Right.
And that's just another reason that we think you need to do the best you can to work things out and make your marriage strong and keep it together.
right.
And obviously there are the few, we've talked about the
The
exceptions,
exceptions, yeah.
but in general. So
Yeah.
anyway, so you had to deal with
Yes.
that, but
yeah.
also the things that happened. So go ahead.
Right. So after my parents got divorced, they both remarried within a year. Right? And Dad picked a good one. I mean, Sherry has been she was in a lot of ways, and still is, more of a mom to me than my mom was, and I will get into that. As far back as I can remember, my mom was a drinker. A lot, not just the occasional glass of wine. It was a lot. I don't ever remember her not drinking, so that didn't help anything.
What was it like I know what it was like when we knew each other.
Yeah.
Where she would just generally have a gin and tonic in her hand all
Yeah,
day, all
yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
But what was it like before we met? When you were younger, right? So you're talking about 8
Right.
years on to 18.
Yeah. The gin and tonic that probably started when I was, I don't know, a teenager probably. But prior to that, it was wine, and it was any alcohol. I mean, she just was
Yeah.
a drinker. But once she hit the gin and tonic, she kind of stuck with it because
Yeah, that's what
you
it
can't
says.
smell it on your breath, right? I mean, that's just. I think there are reasons that she went in that direction. Some of them have to do with thinking she was hiding it.
I guess.
But
yeah.
when you live with her 24/7, there's no hiding it. So Dad chose wisely. My mom did not. We obviously ended up my mom's custody, because that's just how most divorces work. But my stepfather, he kind of made it obvious to me early on that he didn't like me. He just, I remember having that impression of him pretty early, that he didn't like me. And
Okay.
he only got really seriously physically abusive with me one time. And I'm not gonna replay all those details, but it led to some later fears that I've had to deal with. That event right there was extremely traumatic. And it just kind of, that happened within a year of him marrying my mom. So it kind of set the tone
Yep.
for our relationship. So it was me and my two younger brothers. And so one of my brothers, he also did not have a good relationship with. The other one was a baby, basically, when they got married. And so that younger brother looked on him as a dad because my parents got divorced when my youngest brother was 6 weeks old. So, he just never knew any other dad. Right. So, and Bernie was nicer to him. He just was. Bernie, that's just how it was.
So we're just acknowledging that your younger brother has
Yes.
a vastly different perspective.
Very different. We talk about it.
But he was also treated differently.
Yes, he was. Like, there are things that went on for me that he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, he just doesn't.
Okay.
Either he doesn't remember, which is, whatever, he was a little kid, or, just wasn't his experience.
Okay.
That's just how it was. So I will say my mom was how would you say it? She lied all the time.
A liar?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, like, there's
Chronic.
Yeah, I mean,
I
chronic.
can't think of the name.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of
Habitual.
it. Something like that. I just she would make up things out of whole cloth and then just tell us, and of course we're little kids, so she's my mom. What am I gonna do, And then as I got older, started to realize she's making stuff up, And of course, the more she drinks, the more she makes stuff up, It's just, and not only that, but she made believe that we had a happy, thriving family. And I never felt that way. I never felt secure. I never felt loved by her the way a child should feel loved by their mother. I felt like she depended on me too much. Like, there is a relationship that most moms have with their oldest child if they have more children. It's like the oldest child is kind of expected to step up and help take care of things once you have more children. That's just the way it is in families.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier today.
Yeah.
Where we had two of our oldest, our two oldest,
Yes.
our daughters would, when they would help,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's okay. I mean, we didn't ask them to
They
raise our younger children.
No,
We
but
just
they babysat
asked them
for
to
us,
help.
and like my oldest, she took over some homeschool duties after she got married, and her and her husband were still living with us, and I'm homeschooling the younger three, and so she homeschooled them a little bit.
Yeah.
And she would like take them grocery shopping and teach them how to pick the right things and read labels and all that kind of stuff. So, but
Anyway,
you were
in that
yes,
position.
the relationship I had with my mom was more like she was the child and I was expected to be the mom. Or she treated me more like a best friend. Like, sometimes she would flip into that mode. And let me tell you something, moms, that is a terrible idea. Don't do that to your child. Your child needs a mom when they're living at home and they're a child. You can be their friend later. I'm friends with my older daughters now, or with,
with all of you.
what I'm friends with my adult children.
Yeah.
And they come to me and they talk to me and we text each other and we do stuff together. That's fine. don't try to turn your teenage kid into your best friend. Because my mom not only did that, she wanted a drinking buddy. So there's another, layer of trauma, I guess. She started buying me alcohol when I was like 14 or 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm barely out of puberty. And when we go to the grocery store, I'm picking my own wine. I am not even kidding. I remember what the wine bottle looked like, and I remember what it tasted like.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big bottle, too. It wasn't the little, but a regular sized bottle. It was a big bottle of wine. And she would drink with me. Like, she would get me to drink with, it was just so twisted and backwards, And when I drink, I become more vulnerable. I start sharing things, and I probably said things to her that I shouldn't have, given our dysfunctional relationship,
Okay.
And then, Bernie was always this kind of, he was, Bernie's obviously always there, but he's just, I remember at one of my brother's weddings, somebody met him and then came over and talked to me and was like, that's the angriest person I've ever met in my life. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd never encountered somebody who kept a running list of people they hated. Literally. I mean,
but we know a few now. But
we do. Yeah, we do.
But,
we
yeah,
do.
that was the first time
Yeah.
I'd met anybody like that.
Yeah.
It's like,
And once you made it on that list, you were kind of cooked. There was no getting off.
yeah, I mean, you could apologize, you could
Oh,
do
he
whatever,
nah.
and you were never coming off the list.
No. I mean, no. I have to say, the last year of his life, he did try to turn some of that around. So I will give him credit for that. He really did.
Sure.
Yeah,
I remember
he
that.
tried, but damage done. I don't know. That was rough.
Well, let's just
Yeah, no,
acknowledge,
okay.
too. I thought of this earlier, but both of your parents were like they were in a lot of cases because of what they had experienced.
I don't know about my mom, but Bernie for sure, yes.
Okay, so maybe not your mom. We're still not entirely clear that we're getting an accurate picture from your mom's family.
Yeah.
Just a few bits here and there
right.
kind of
Right.
tell us that she didn't have a terrible life. But
She told
Growing
she told us, the three of us, that she had a terrible life.
yeah, I mean, maybe that was her
And
perception
she,
too.
she emphasized it, and she was always the victim, and she, her parents were horrible to her. She just said a lot of these things, and then, after she passed away, we went to her sisters, and we were talking to them, and they were like, no, that's not,
Right.
none of that is true. So, and well, that's, I'll get into that in a minute.
But
That's,
my point is we're not. Well, I have 2 points
Okay.
before we continue. One is, whatever caused her to get the way she was,
Right.
she had certain issues, and maybe she was the golden child growing up, but that doesn't. But you know what her parents were like.
yes, I do.
Okay. And that's all I'll say. But
Yeah.
and then Bernie came out of the situation where his mom
Wasn't great. Yeah.
had him and
Yeah.
didn't want to raise him, so he was raised by his grandmother.
Yes.
And so I guess he didn't have a dad around. or a
No,
grandfather.
there was definitely no dad, and
So-
he didn't really have a relationship with his mom either. So,
Yeah. So I'm not saying all this to excuse bad behavior.
right,
We should always repent of that and turn around and change.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it doesn't come out of nowhere,
right,
right? And my second point is just we're not saying all this just to bash them, because that's not the point
no,
of this.
I think
You're trying to just describe
right.
how life was.
Well,
So
I mean, the term that comes to mind is generational trauma.
okay,
That's I think that's what we dealt with as kids. Having them as our parents, and then you don't. I mean, kind of the point of this podcast is to say that, it has to be broken somewhere, the generational trauma.
We have talked about doing it yourself.
Yeah.
Stop with your marriage, break.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about it earlier, way back, breaking the habit, if you want to call it a habit or whatever, of divorce in the family.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what we've tried to do.
Right.
We've gotten married and we're going to work through things and we're not going to get divorced. And we hope to break that, and we hope that our kids will never have to experience that.
Right.
And their kids will never have to experience it. And I
Right.
know things happen, but that's what we're hoping.
Yes.
So we're not going to pass that on.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I keep talking.
No. I'm trying to I'm trying to talk about my childhood trauma without going into like
Well, I want a
graphic detail.
couple examples. And you can say it's not terrible, or you can say this was more terrible than I'm describing if you want, but just give an idea.
Well, I mean, the drinking.
The kind of things that happen. So the drinking was
Yeah. Oh, okay. My mom, in addition to everything else, was bulimic for 30 years, I want to say.
Okay.
All my growing up, for sure.
So that was a bad example for you.
It was not just a bad example. It's one of these things where you grow up with this thing that happens in your house and you think it's normal.
Oh,
right? So you go out in the world and you go to other people's houses and it's not happening and you're like, what's wrong with this family? You know, when what's happening at your house is actually extremely abnormal and shouldn't be happening at all. Things like, every night after dinner, my mom would get up from the dining room table. She would eat her dinner. She'd get up from the dining room table, go upstairs, and we'd hear her throwing up every night, almost without fail. Yeah. And we could hear her. And, we just went about our evening, we're watching TV, we're doing our homework, whatever. She's throwing up every single night. And in addition to that, she was also addicted to laxatives. So we're Gen X here. I don't know if any of you Gen X people remember Correctol. It came in a pink box, I remember, because I used to find it. Okay. It came in a pink box, and then it was sleeves of pills. Like there would be, 20 pills on a sleeve or whatever. Okay. And she would stand in front of us having a conversation and punch out every single pill in a sleeve. Put the whole thing in her mouth and gulp it down with a gin and tonic. I did their laundry. I would go downstairs and do their laundry and do the ironing and all that stuff. I'd find those sleeve things shoved in her pockets, and on the floor and just in the laundry, and find the pink Correctol box, all of it, and of course, because it's happening in front of you all the time, you don't think it's abnormal.
Okay.
Right? But she also had a very twisted view of the female form, when I was probably 15, 16 years old, she basically looked like a refugee. Okay. Like sunken in cheeks, no fat on her body at all. You could see all of her ribs, right? But because that is actual body dysmorphia, that's what anorexia, or that's what bulimia is, right? She's still looking at herself in the mirror and calling herself fat. And she would make comments about my figure because my mom was 5'8", and she had this kind of stately figure. I mean, she was in her prime prior to destroying herself. My mom was a very beautiful woman. Mm-hmm. Dark hair, brown eyes. She had the most beautiful pair of legs you ever saw on a woman. I mean, she was gorgeous. She olive skin. I mean, she was drop dead gorgeous. She had $1 million smile. That's what people used to say, right? She had perfect teeth, right? Okay. Yeah. And then there's me. And look, I know you think I'm beautiful, right?
You are. Oh my gosh.
Okay, my mom's 5'8" and this stately looking, and I'm 5'4". I am my dad replicated. I'm German. I'm 5'4" and I have curves. And I don't have nice legs. I'm 54 years old. I've never had nice legs in my life. Never.
Okay, but
Never.
when you were younger,
So she would
she would
point these things out to me, you know, and the flaw. I mean, it was constant, right? And I remember, okay, well, kind of minor trauma, but you know, you're a silly teenage girl and you say silly things. So I said something to her about I would love to go into modeling. I think I want to be a model. And she straight up said, "You are not pretty enough. And models don't have freckles."
I've seen models with freckles.
You have now, but I'm talking about back in the 70s and 80s.
In her day.
Yeah, in her day. But that's also stupid because Doris Day, one of the most beautiful women on the face of the earth, has freckles. So, anyway.
What else would they say about you, though? Like, you mentioned things with school and your grades and stuff like that.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I was never smart enough. And, you know, I'm so glad that parents today are encouraged to help their kids with their homework and be involved. You need to be involved in your child's school right now. I'm just
absolutely.
We'll just throw that out right there and just say that. But
you need to know what they're being taught.
Yes, you do. You need to know what they're being taught. But parents today are much more involved in their kids' schooling and helping them with their homework and making sure they achieve and, you know, they make good grades and, you know, all of that stuff. That was not a thing with our generation, really. Our you know, we were sent to school, we came home. I generally came home to an empty house.
Yeah, describe all that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was a latchkey kid. A lot of kids from our generation were latchkey kids, but because my mom depended on me so much, I had to come home from school. I had to be there. I couldn't leave. I couldn't go out with my friends or whatever. I had to be at home because my brothers were there, and I had to make dinner.
And that's not...
I know it doesn't sound horrible.
Doesn't sound bad, but did they ever like your dinner?
No.
Did they?
No.
You know, when you did, what did they say about your intelligence? I mean, I'm
Right.
just remember things that we talked about.
So
and
they,
I want to make sure that all gets out real quick.
I didn't do well in school. I wasn't a very disciplined. I didn't have disciplined study habits. I also had zero motivation to make good grades. And, you know, and then I bring home the report card and it's got some bad grades on it. And instead of doing the parental thing, which is, okay, we've got to work on this. You know, you need tutors, you know, we got to help you. You know, we got,
Right.
you know, you can't, they would mock. They would mock me. They would make fun of me. Yeah, I did get called stupid a lot. At one point, they threatened to have me tested to see if I was retarded. So I got no help at all with my schoolwork ever. It did not happen in my house. You either made good grades or you were stupid, and that's all there was to it. So,
Okay.
and you know, my mom was extremely intelligent until she let her brain rot with all of the stuff that she did. Bernie was also very smart. And I think they just expected me to do it. And honestly, I don't think I was wired for school, sitting at a desk and,
It could have been,
you know.
I mean, it sounds like that, maybe, and then the motivation. And then
zero motivation.
When you got the comments,
yeah.
it just bashed you down.
Yes.
So why try? That sort
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
That's what you're
Yeah.
describing.
So I barely got out of high school.
Okay.
You know, my grade, I don't remember what my grade point average was, but it was very, very low. Like I scraped by the skin of my teeth.
Okay.
Pretty much. So there was never any talk of you going to go to college or, you know, what are you going to do with your life? Those questions never came up. At one point I considered going in the military.
Mm-hmm.
But there again, they told me that I probably couldn't do that either because I was too dumb.
Okay.
And that's a pretty damning statement because there's a lot of dumb people in the military. there's a lot of kids who graduate with not so good grades and they go in the military and they do fine, right?
Yeah, they do great.
So I don't know.
It's not because they were dumb. It's
No.
because they couldn't do well in the particular school environment.
Yeah.
Right. Which could have been part of your problem too.
But see, one of the things that led me to the conclusion that maybe the military might be good for me was I was in Marine Corps ROTC in high school, and they took us to Parris Island. Parris Island's one of the toughest Marine Corps bases in the country.
Well, that's where they do boot camp.
And so I went to boot camp for a week, and they put us through. It was boot camp. I mean, coming in, waking us up at 5 a.m. We had to do all the, you line up, and then you do PT, and then you get yelled at all day long. I loved it. I don't know. I don't know if that's speaks to the trauma that I'd already been through with my parents, and it's like, well, I can handle this, whatever. I don't know what it was, but that's one of the things that led me to believe that, okay, maybe I can go in the military. Okay. But it didn't happen. After I graduated high school, I went to work full time. My stepdad did buy me a car. I'll give him that. So I got a full-time job, just sales, whatever. I was working at J.C. Penney's or whatever it was. And then I wrecked my car, and it was, ignorance. I was not allowed to go through, driver's ed. They didn't have driver's ed, but that was never mentioned either. My parents, going down another rabbit hole. They wouldn't let me get a driver's license
until
I was 18.
18.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it wasn't because, some discipline thing or, whatever. My mom didn't want me to have transportation to go anywhere. She wanted me to be at home, period.
Yeah. So basically you were the maid.
Yes.
And that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I got.
Yeah.
Not just from your description, but after you left and your mom.
Well, I was about to,
okay, you tell me.
So after my car accident, and see, I had this terrible car accident, and I mean, I shouldn't be sitting here right now. I rolled my car down a very steep hill, and it was smashed. And somehow I survived. And my brother, who was with me, somehow ended up outside the car, and he still to this day does not remember how that happened. I don't know if he got thrown out or if he got out. He does not remember.
Right.
So somebody across the road from the accident saw it happen. She came over. She got us both back on our feet. How I was still standing, I don't know. Put a blanket around me, and she's like trying to comfort me. And she said, "It's okay. It's all over now." And I said, "No, it's not. It's just getting started." I knew exactly what was going to happen. My parents, so we go to get an ambulance, go to the hospital. My parents came to the hospital, and they were furious. There was no sympathy. There was no, "Oh my God, I was so worried," or "Are you okay?" They didn't even ask about our physical, how we were physically. I got severely scolded. We got yelled at. It was just, and because that's what I meant when I said that to that woman, because I knew that's exactly what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that there was not going to be any parental sympathy. If one of our kids got in a car accident, I'd rush right to the hospital. I'm not worried about the damn car. And I'm not angry at them unless they were drunk, and I wasn't drunk.
But you'd still see how they were first. And
yes. Then you evaluate the rest of the situation, right? So Bernie went and, he took pictures of the car, and I can't believe you're still alive. It's not, I can't believe you're still alive. It's like, wow, I can't believe you survived that. That kind of just cold. But so though that set of circumstances led to me having to quit my job, because the place that I was working was 25 to 30 minutes away from where we were living. And I had a car, so just drive there every day, right? But now I can't drive.
Okay.
And so they would not help me arrange transportation to get to my job. I had to take a taxi, and that only lasted a couple of weeks because it got way too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what am I working for? I'm paying for a taxi to get to work, and that's it. So I quit my job, and my mom was like, okay, well, then you are my full-time maid. Those were her words. And these are all of the things that you are going to do for me while I'm at work. If you're not going to go to work, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So, and that was the point. That was my breaking point. I just had enough.
Okay.
So I tell people I ran away from home because that's what it felt like to me. I was 18. So yes, I could have left at any point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I threw all my stuff in trash bags and boxes. And while my mom was at work, got everything loaded into my friend's car, and I just left. And I don't remember if I left a note. I don't remember. I called my mom a couple days later and told her, and she just hysterics, of course. She'd lost her maid. It wasn't really about me leaving. It was about something else for her to be dramatic about.
Okay.
Something else for her to, I don't know, cry to her friends about, or call her mom and cry. I don't know what it was, but, then I would call her once a week or so and just like, hey, mom, still alive, trying to do the respectful daughter thing, that it was hard because she would just weep over the phone and, get dramatic again, please come home and all this. And that the last time that I called her, she told me that she thought that she might have cancer. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew how unhealthy my mom was, so of course I believed her. Of course I did.
Okay.
She had a list of symptoms, and she'd been talking to this doctor, and she had the whole story. The whole story.
Yep.
And so I was like, well, okay, I guess I have to go home. I mean, this is serious, She seems like she's really sick. So my friend drove me home, and I walked in the door, and nobody was there because they were both at work, and my brothers were off doing whatever they were doing. And there's a note on the table, and it said something to the effect of, because I told her I was going to come home and win, right? So there's the note on the table, and it says, I don't have cancer, but these are the things I would like for you to get done before I get home from work. She actually thought that I was just going to come back home and stay.
Okay.
At that point, I shipped all my boxes of stuff to Maryland, where my dad was living, because I had been in communication with him already and told him that I wanted to come live with him. And, he was like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love, of course I'd love to have you. He and I always had a close relationship, right? I think I'm closer to him probably than my brothers are.
Yep. Okay.
So, but he and I, we talked every couple of weeks, all through this, right? I mean, all through my life, not just through that little event, but, we talked. And he said, okay, I will buy you a plane ticket when you ship the boxes. Like when I ship all my boxes of stuff out there.
Yeah. So you had to commit.
Yeah. So I called him and I said, boxes are in the mail. And he bought me a plane ticket. And I got on a plane, with overstuffed bags because I didn't ship all my stuff. So I dragged on the plane with me, or, put in luggage or whatever. And he picked me up from the airport, and I don't think he knew what he was getting into.
Probably not.
I mean, he didn't really have any idea what it was like in our home, you know, um, because my mom pretty much constantly drank. I never knew what version of her I was going to encounter.
Mm-hmm.
And Bernie also drank a lot. And if he started drinking, that's when he became even nastier. Like I said, I had one kind of physical abuse event with him very early on in their marriage. And then, you know, he said, well, I don't hit girls. So he wouldn't, like, he did put his hands on me a couple of, not in a sexual way, but like grabbed my shirt and slammed me up against a wall a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
But he always said he wouldn't hit girls, you know.
The wall might hit you.
Yeah, the wall might hit me, but he would do
Anyway,
it. And, you know, it's like, and there were, but he would rip me apart emotionally and psychologically, like verbally. It was just constant verbal abuse, like all the time. A lot of the, you're stupid, you're ugly, you know, you're worthless, you're never going to amount to anything. You're going to marry some trailer trash guy and end up in a trailer park. I heard that one a lot. That was him. That was him. And you know, the traumatic part of that actually was that my mom would be standing behind him, listening to him say all this to me. And then when he was done, she'd tell me to go to my room. There wasn't any, you know, your dad's just drunk. It's, you know, he didn't mean it. None of that. She didn't care. She didn't want me in her presence when I was crying or upset. That was not tolerated. My first boyfriend, we dated for a year and then he broke it off. So I'm heartbroken. You know, it's the first guy I ever felt like I was in love with, right? And so we're sitting on the couch and we're watching some movie or something and I start crying. And she looks at me and she says, go to your room. I don't want to see you right now. Okay. That's how it was handled.
Yeah.
You know, I was not allowed to express any emotion except anger. That was the only one that was acceptable.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're kind of getting into how all this trauma affected you.
Yeah.
And what you brought
yeah.
with you.
Right. Right. So I just kind of, all negative emotion kind of got channeled into anger. Okay. So if I was sad, if I was grieving, if I was depressed, you know, if I was just feeling down, whatever it was, turned into anger, like immediately. And that's what I brought to our relationship. You know, that and this just almost paralyzing lack of self-worth. I didn't feel like I had any self-worth at all, you know. And of course you built me up. You always told me that I was beautiful, that I was worthwhile. I mean, you did all these things, right? But it just, I didn't believe it, you know. And some of that also was instilled by my mom, you know. Not only was she like habitual liar, you know, like all of my life. After she passed away, we had to clean out their house, and I find like journals and diaries and all this stuff. I don't think she ever told me the truth about anything. If she was telling the truth in those diaries, then she lied to me about a whole hell of a lot more than she ever, you know, than I ever found out until she was dead, you know.
Okay.
So it's just this, I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, so you brought what into our marriage? I mean, what were you dealing with? What did you do? I mean, I remember the anger part.
Yeah.
You know, and then when I would point it out, you would get angry that I was saying you were angry.
Yeah.
And then say, and I'm not angry, I'm just upset. Or, and it's like for a long time, and I had no idea what to do, so I had to work around that.
Mm.
But that was one part of it, and then the anxiety
Yeah.
you dealt with.
Yeah. And
You
some of the
wanna
anxiety
talk
was
about
just
some of that. The
well,
result of you
right.
of all that
Mm.
coming into our marriage, because we got married a year after you moved out,
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
or thereabouts,
Yeah.
uh, caused what symptoms or what for that you exhibited, and so we talked about the anger and
Well, yeah, there was the anger. Also, I never felt like I could trust you completely because I had never trusted anyone completely.
well,
Like
nobody
I
acted
never
trustworthy.
had that in my life. Someone that was completely. Oh, I take that back. There were two people that I knew I could talk to about anything, and that they would help me. One of them was Sherry, obviously. The other one was my youth group leader from church.
Okay.
She was also like another mom to me. You know, she really took me under her wing and she really tried to help me. You know, I don't think she knew the extent of everything that was going on in my house, but she really did try to help me. But I had a serious lack of trust and just humanity, you know, and just, one thing I struggled with early on was I really felt like I needed somebody to be there for me and back me up and stand up for me,
Okay.
right? Because I never had that. I never had that. You know, literally my mom just, what I just described to you about how she would stand behind Bernie and listen to him berate me and then, but do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I grew up with. You know, so
Yeah.
that was, it was something I felt like I needed from you, but I didn't know how to communicate it, I think.
Right. I mean, I know I came in not having experienced any of that, obviously, but then, you know, standing up for myself at times. I mean, which I did. I learned to do and dealt with bullies, and it never really had any long-term effect on me, because I'd stand up to them, and was consciously working on self-improvement in like areas of leadership and stuff like that through college, and I was still a jerk. I mean, I
never saw that
I
side.
have plenty of regrets, but I got better, and so by the time college was over, you know, and I had become a Christian,
right?
Things were really different, and but anyway, I'm not trying to describe me, but
Right.
here I am coming into the marriage not knowing that, thinking, you know, and I'd look at each other's situations, and it's like I always thought, it's like, well, you know, if you're ever in any danger, I'm going to be there, no problem, right? But if somebody's just talking to you and they say something mean, you know how to stand up for yourself, and I won't immediately jump in.
But I didn't know
and
how to
raise
stand up.
the.
Yeah.
I was thinking, if I jump in, I'm going to raise the heat level of this argument, and it's going to become worse than it needs to be, rather than you just standing there and knowing how to tell somebody off or whatever you know, or just stand up for yourself, because I never saw them as a big deal because I'd already dealt with them, and it wasn't a big deal to me.
Right.
So I wasn't providing. I know you had said that a number of times later on. I wasn't providing that for you.
Right.
That sense of
security
that I'm gonna be there and help or
right.
deal with these things. So that was a source of conflict.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm trying to, you know, what to really just get across the weight of all of that, and you didn't even, I'll be clear, and you didn't describe a lot of the really traumatic things. I think individual incidents, whatever, that you went through that just piled on.
Yeah.
So all of that together for 10 years
Yeah.
from 8 to 18.
Yeah.
And that brought into our marriage the anger that we mentioned, the anxiety.
Yeah.
To the point where you had to, for a while, get on, what was it? Xanax.
It wasn't just a while. I mean, it wasn't a short amount of time. It was longer than it should have been.
So that should have been dealt with a different way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the doctor just kept, no big deal, right?
Yeah.
Just keep writing the prescription.
Yeah.
And it helped in the sense that it would flatten you out, but not in the best
No,
way.
I'll kind of go into that. And,
Well, not too much. But I'm just trying to say, what we're dealing with.
Right.
There was a sense of lack of self-worth, the anger, anxiety, and that came out in how you related to the kids.
It did.
And that's affected our relationship with them.
Yes, for sure. The older three, not. I think I was a better mom. I had kind of.
We would work through.
Started to work through. Yeah,
we're going to get there. But you would work through stuff with them by the time. And our oldest is, perfectly fine with us. It's great. Our relationship with her is great.
Yeah.
The next two, not so great.
Yeah.
And we're just, praying that they'll understand and come around. And then the younger three weren't really that affected. But what was it causing you to do? So you're on Xanax. The girls even, the older two even wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, that was, the older two were teenagers when they came to me. This was, so we were part of a church that I don't believe handled it correctly, because I would try to bring up some of these things that I'm struggling with, and I periodically struggled with some pretty serious depression. And the church that we belong to, they didn't really help. They didn't help.
No.
They thought they were helping, but what it did was make me feel worse, because it made me feel like this really is my fault.
They would always they would always say this kind of thing is caused by your sin.
Yes.
And it's like, no, the way I respond when I get angry is my sin.
Yeah.
But where does the anger come from?
Yes. That was never delved into. They would not
acknowledge where that came from, and so you could never get at the root.
Well, I would say things like, this happened to me when I was a kid. And I would say some of these things that I've discussed, and the answer I would get was, don't try to blame what you're doing now on your childhood. And, to a certain extent, maybe that might be true. You can't blame every bad thing that happens to you as an adult on things that happened to you when you were a kid. But the thing is, if you have a lot of trauma as a child, it alters your brain. It alters the way you handle things, right?
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But what I think to keep this part a little bit short.
Okay.
What I just said was like, what you do with that anger is your responsibility, right?
Yeah, it is.
But they didn't say that.
Right.
Or I should say this, the anger itself is just this for you, for someone dealing with trauma.
Yeah.
Soldiers dealing with PTSD.
Yeah.
Could be that sort of thing. That's just this quick to anger.
Yeah.
Unable to control it.
Yeah.
And it's just there.
It felt like it was an undercurrent in my life.
Right. That's the word I was looking for.
For
just this
years. It was
undercurrent.
just, and I could be We could be on vacation as a family. We could be out as a family having a good time. You know, I could be on a date with one of the girls, and it was always there.
Yeah.
And I just never felt like I had it fully under control, you know.
Well, you did.
Probably what caused my anxiety, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, what if I blow up, you know, which happened from time to time.
Yeah.
I was never physically abusive to my kids. I never said to my children, "You're stupid, ugly, worthless." You know, those words, I was very careful, right? But they did deal with some irrational anger from time to time. Not
From you.
from
Yeah.
me, not necessarily directed at them, but just anger.
Well, if
You
it's
know?
around,
Yeah.
just like you experienced, if they're in the house and you're feeling that way,
Yeah.
and expressing it,
Yeah.
even if it's not at them, and you know, it still affects them.
Right. Yeah. Obviously it did. Yeah.
And you know, and parents aren't perfect. We know stuff happens.
Yeah.
But this was more of the, like you said, it was just the undercurrent, constant.
And I couldn't
thing
figure out why.
that you couldn't figure out.
I could not figure out
Yeah,
why.
and you couldn't even remember.
No.
It's like, what is causing? Why is it like this?
No.
Like, I can't figure this out. And that's where, let's finish up the church
Okay.
part. It's like, that's where the church did not help,
Right.
because, and they were, at the time, they were very much against going to, say, a psychiatrist, because, you know, they said psychiatrists will just tell you to blame your parents for your sin. And it's like, no, and they were right and they were wrong.
Right.
Right. That's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to make that distinction is what we do with our trauma, with our anger, is our responsibility.
Yeah.
So when we commit an act that's wrong, that's our responsibility because we did it.
Yeah.
But what's causing this undercurrent of anger could have been caused by past traumatic experiences. And, you know, when you grow up under this constant, the other things, like when you grow up under this constant stress
Yeah.
of being in that kind of a household,
Yeah,
you never knew
yeah.
when Bernie was going to
Right.
blow up at
Yep.
you. Right. So you didn't even mention that.
Yeah, I know. It's like,
You've talked about that in the past.
yeah,
right?
like, I never woke up and thought, today's going to be a great day. I don't ever remember thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up and the first thought that comes in my head is, what fresh hell is waiting for me today? What one thing am I going to say that's going to set him off, set her off? You know,
Yeah,
what am I
to your
going to,
dad.
what am I going to encounter?
Right.
You know, that's a constant every day in my life.
Okay.
So,
Growing
you know,
up.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. So here we are married, and we're talking about. The Xanax is there, but it's not really totally working.
No, I mean, we'd been married 15 years, I think, at this point.
Something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
The girls were noticing.
Right. So
The anger, but what else?
Yes, but the girls also noticed. So this was around the time when Bernie was sick. He had lung cancer, and so I'm trying to deal with my mom, and I'm also, you know, trying to navigate. He's dying. This person that abused me.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just a weird. That's a weird place to be in when you're trying to process that.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yes, I was drinking. I started drinking more heavily. Like you and I would have a glass of wine or whatever, but I was sneaking the alcohol in the middle of the
During the
afternoon.
day,
Yeah, I was doing it during the day. And taking Xanax. And I was also taking a freaking sleeping pill to help me sleep.
Right. That's
So
right.
there was just, I
remember
just
that now.
constant fatigue,
Okay.
you know, but the fatigue felt better than the anger, you know, so it's like it just, and
Okay.
obviously the alcohol is numbing,
Yep.
you know. But yeah, so my oldest two were 15 and 16, I guess, and they caught me a few times drinking in the middle of the afternoon, and they already knew that I was taking Xanax. And I think, what, did they come to you first?
Yeah, it was
'Cause
usually
they
like
they
in
kind
form
of
an
had an
intervention,
intervention,
kind of thing,
yes.
and we'd sit down and talk about it.
Yeah.
And you'd be
I was furious.
mad about it.
Yeah.
And in denial,
Yes.
right? And so that was so here I am. It's like I don't know. I'm not a counselor, obviously. I don't know what's going on, what's
Yeah.
causing this. Just
Right.
that the girls are reporting this or talking about it with you, and of course I'm away at work, so I don't see a lot of it.
Yeah.
Most of it.
Yeah.
And when I was there in the evenings, and by then I think just me being there took
Well,
the stress off, so that
There were a lot of evenings you would come home and I would already be tipsy, though. That was for
and
sure.
I didn't even know that
Yeah.
or recognize
Oh yeah.
it.
Oh yeah.
You know. So, anyway, so I didn't know what I didn't even know that there was a problem other than what the girls were saying. And certainly if I knew there was a problem other than mom's angry all the time,
Yeah.
you know, and I kind of knew that.
I
'cause they
mean,
were saying it, but-
there was some of that, but they also pointed out that they caught me drinking in the middle
I
of the
don't remember
afternoon.
that. I don't think
They
they,
came
said
to
that to
okay.
me.
Well, they did come to me with that, and I would make excuses or whatever, just
Okay.
kind of
Okay, so that was happening.
yes. And this was around the time when our marriage was starting to struggle too. So it was like all of it compounded at the same time. That all
But I think
coincided with me coming to you and saying I don't think I want to be married to you anymore. I remember saying that to you,
I know you said it,
and it was around that same
Right.
So it was like
but I think that was caused by
yes,
the stress, and you wanted me to back you up.
yes,
And I was backing you up with the girls, but at the same time,
maybe you shouldn't have.
I shouldn't have been. Well, I obviously always on your side,
Yes.
but at the same time, I wanted improvement.
There's a difference between backing me up wholeheartedly and saying no, your mom's not doing this, and backing me up by saying you need to get help and we're going to get you help.
Yeah, and so yeah, we were both under this. You know, can't go to a psychiatrist because, well, we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
In a second, but can't do that because the church and the way they've described psychiatrists, and to be honest, psychiatrists were generally always pointing at the early things
Yeah.
in your life, and they didn't really solve that.
Yeah.
Most of them did not get to the point where you would actually solve the cause of the anger
Right.
to deal with the trauma.
Right.
And of course, they would just say, and then while the church was right about the actions you were taking, this guy psychiatrist would be excusing those actions, which was what the church was saying was wrong. This particular church,
Right.
And I think they're, in that sense, they were right.
Sure.
What you do is your responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened to you may have been your parents, or it may have been some other thing.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about for everybody else out there. We're not just talking about that one thing. Okay, so that puts stress on our marriage,
Yes.
and so what? And Bernie was sick.
Yes. So I'm making trips back and forth to
trips back and forth.
Indiana
So
and
that's
having to
more
deal with my
stress.
mom,
Yeah.
and Bernie, although when Bernie got sick, he mellowed out. I don't
Well,
know.
like you said, during
yeah,
the last
couple
year
of
of
years.
his life,
Yeah.
I think he recognized it, and
My life's coming to
knows?
an end and I need to
to mellow things out a
mellow
bit,
things.
to
Yeah.
try to get better, and
Right.
and he tried. So we'll, like you said, give him that credit.
Yeah. So
so-
anyway, they came to me. They were both upset, and they at that point cut me off. They weren't speaking to me anymore, and they were very angry at me for not acknowledging that there was a problem.
Yes.
I think they knew that I knew there was a problem, but I was just like, you're not going to talk to me like that. It was that kind of.
Yeah.
So, and it put that's like more strain in the household. Now I've got my oldest daughter and her husband are living with us. So actually Kate would have been 18. So they're living with us. The next daughter down, still living at home, and they're all furious with me.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I are having marital problems. And
Because
it's
of
just
all
like,
this,
you know,
yeah.
it was just this
The storm.
it was a
right?
storm. Yeah, it was a storm brewing. It was bad. It was bad
yeah.
there for a little while. And I remember, so let's come around to, you know, how I started to resolve things.
Okay, so after all that, we'll talk about, let me ask you about, you know, what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was primarily you
Okay.
dealing with it,
Right.
to work through that.
Mm-hmm.
And why not go to a therapist?
Right.
Okay, and I'll just interject or say that if you, I think therapy is probably can be a good thing for a lot of people
Yes.
if you find the right one.
Yes.
But you have to be very discerning about finding a therapist who really wants to help you, as opposed to just have a client that's going to pay him every week or whatever.
Right.
And we're seeing, I mean, we are seeing that a lot of that in the medical community. So I'm not dissing all therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or just, I don't know what else, whatever kind of therapy is out there, but they are out there. So you have to be aware of, you want to find one that's really going to support you and
Help you to work
you
through your stuff, not
yeah,
not just talk.
yeah, not just talk about
Yeah.
it every week, but actually work through it.
Yeah.
And that's what you did.
Right.
So that's, and you, at that point, we had left the church.
Oh, yeah.
Or just changed churches.
Right.
I mean, we're still Christians, but we were going to a different church, because of other stuff that happened at our original church.
Yes.
Besides how
There were a lot of circumstances.
yeah,
It wasn't
how they
just this.
otherwise, you know, circumstances other than how they dealt with that sort of thing. And we weren't established enough in another church to go to that pastor.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't know. And we didn't see psychiatrists, psychologists as useful at that point
Yeah.
because of what we learned, but also, you know, I mean, insurance only covers so much, and we couldn't just shell out tons of bucks
Right.
for that.
Right.
You know, so not that we wouldn't have tried, but we were already in, our finances just wouldn't allow it.
Right. Yeah.
And we're
yeah.
still raising the 6 kids and everything else.
Right.
So, so how did all that said? And so I'm not saying don't go to a therapist.
Right.
I'm just saying be very discerning. But that's not what we did for reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So how did?
Well,
you
I mean,
work
I don't. What happened was, so we had moved from one rental house to another. And I remember laying in bed and saying, God, I don't know what to do now. Like, 2 of my daughters had not spoken to me in months, you know, and that's very distressing. One of them is married now,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and she's still, our relationship is just not in a great place at all, you know.
Right now, or at that?
At that point.
Okay.
At that point, right.
Yeah.
And I remember just laying in bed and going, God, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do.
Did
you know?
you acknowledge that you actually had an issue with anger
Yes.
at that point?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm stuck. I feel angry all the time, and I don't know what to do about it anymore. And I just feel stuck, you know, and I do feel stupid, ugly, and worthless. I mean, and that's when a voice broke through that I know was God and said, "That's not what I see." I heard those words.
Okay.
And that's kind of, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, the spell was broken. Because we all have an inner dialogue,
Yeah.
right?
Well, most of us.
Most of us do. I know I do, right?
Yeah.
So at that moment, it dawned on me that my inner dialogue was not my voice speaking to me. It was Bernie.
Okay. Wow.
And when I realized that, and this was after he had passed away, right?
Okay.
When I realized it was his voice, I shut it off. I just shut it off. It's like, I don't have to listen to that anymore.
All right.
And then I got out my Bible and I started reading it every day. And I would have prayer time and I would read my Bible every day. But also, during this period of time, you and I were still going through our marital difficulties, trying to figure things out. And I just started spilling stuff. I started telling you things that happened to me when I was a kid that I had never told you before.
Yeah.
And I think you were a little bit surprised.
Yeah, because you had never. I mean, I kind of knew a little bit.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of the specific things that you had not told me up to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just listened. Here I am. Again, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just listening.
You did, but you also, because I was able to verbalize them, I was able to make connections between this event that happened to me when I was a kid and make almost a direct connection to, that's why I behave this way when this happens.
Uh-huh.
You know, like the whole thing with you not backing me up. Oh, well, now I know why. Nobody ever did.
Yeah.
I never felt like I had backup as a kid. Nobody ever stood up for me, ever. As a matter of fact, I was called on to stand up for other people. I was expected to.
Yeah.
But nobody ever stood up for me, except for those two wonderful ladies that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So, you know, it was connections like that. You know,
Okay.
Oh, okay, so the reason I react so quickly and get so angry at you when you don't back me up is because that's what I felt like I had nobody.
Yeah. And your expectations were different than what I saw as needed.
Yes.
So I'm ignorant of what maybe I could have done. And I think I just would have headed off the symptom of anger. And
I mean,
let you know that,
right.
yeah, I'm here, but at the same time, I would be cutting out your ability to just stand up for yourself,
right.
which you do much better now.
So, and the anger, you know, I that connection was, you know, what I discussed a little bit ago, where I said, you know, the only emotion that was acceptable for me to express in my home was anger.
Yeah.
Because I think my mom saw that as me standing up for myself
Okay.
in some twisted way
Yeah.
or whatever. So, like, if I got overly excited or if I was really happy about something, I was still sent to my room. I was still told to leave the room. I was still told to you need to calm down.
Mm.
You know, so even that wasn't acceptable. So
Okay.
everything got channeled into rage. Everything.
Yeah.
Because that was the only thing that was acceptable. And once I realized that, once I made that connection, it helped me to go, oh, well, I'm not really angry. I'm just sad.
Okay.
So now I can sort it out. You know, I can tease it apart. And even though it might feel like anger initially, I need to step back, take a breath, and go, wait a minute. I'm not really angry. I'm offended. Or I'm just upset. Or, you know, whatever it was.
Fear.
A fear. I was anxious.
Anxious.
Yes. Anxiety
like
definitely came out as anger. No question about it.
Yeah.
So that, but telling you all these things that happened to me when I was a kid, just saying them, acknowledging that they happened, helped me to connect them to specific, for lack of a better word, toxic behaviors that I was exhibiting.
Okay.
And then once I was able to make the connection, oh, well, now I can go back and figure out how to actually deal with this like a decent human being, instead of turning into the Incredible Hulk every time something happens that doesn't make me happy. Right?
Yeah.
So that helped a lot. And then, I'm physical exercise was also huge. Getting out, taking walks, doing all the things that a therapist should be telling you to do, in addition to talking through your trauma. Okay. You should be eating the right foods. You should be, getting outside and getting sunshine. You should be getting regular exercise. Yeah. You should be hanging out with people who support you and love you and, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, and I did take Xanax for 10 years. And I think we did talk about that in a prior podcast. We talked about my problem with the Xanax addiction.
Yeah, and we dealt with that. I mean, once we moved to South Carolina,
it kind of gave me no choice. I had no choice.
Yeah, you had no choice, which was a good thing.
It really was. At that point, I had strongly started considering, like, I need to stop taking this. Yeah. I knew it wasn't good for me. My mom passed away, and we went, we dealt with all the funeral and all the stuff, and I was there for a week. I never cried once. Mm-hmm. Some of that is correlated to our relationship and the way it was. Yeah. But some of that was the Xanax. Yeah. Because I felt flat all the time. Like there was no emotion at all. And I didn't want to be like that. Right. And so we moved to South Carolina. You're not allowed to take it. You have to prove that you need it to have it, right? And I didn't prove that I needed it. Those are the new rules. Yeah, there are a lot of rules that weren't in place where we lived before. That just wasn't the way it was.
And I kind of think, well, I don't know, about how Maryland deals with that now. It may be different. Yeah. Because Xanax is it is addictive.
Yes, it is. No question. It took me a month.
It took you a month using another drug.
Yes.
To taper off.
Yes.
Right. And at the same time, you were doing the exercise. You'd found the CrossFit gym.
Yes. So we moved to South Carolina, and I found a great gym, and it was great people. I still have relationships with, a lot of these people. My coach was just awesome. I mean, they all knew that I was trying to get off Xanax. Yeah. And they were so supportive. They would message me, and they kept in contact that whole time. They made sure I was okay. I don't want to cry. Yeah. And, they kept tabs, and they made sure that I was okay. And I got a lot of encouragement, Yeah. And it was a very hard month. It was, and I know people take that and they have a much more dramatic withdrawal than I did. I've heard some horror stories about people getting off of it. So I'm so grateful that was not my experience. But it was hard. It was really hard. I would have full on anxiety attacks. Horrible. Yeah. And I just had to work through it myself. There was just, I wanted to take that pill. I knew if I took that pill, it would go away. Yeah. That's all I had to do. So, yeah, that was rough. But I'm so much better off now. I'm also off the sleeping pills. I don't take the sleeping pills anymore either. Yes. So I'm a much better human being, and I as far as the drinking, I I'm not a teetotaler. You know,
we have
a lot of people go from, I was an alcoholic to I just don't drink.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that it was necessary. I don't have a problem with it. I have a couple glasses of wine on Friday night and sometimes Saturday night, and that's it. I just, and now I'm at the point where I have so many allergic reactions to everything that white wine's about. I can drink anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't drink to get drunk or to numb myself anymore, which is what I was doing. That's what I was doing.
Yeah. And I think you were headed, given what you've told me during the day and all that, you were headed toward the physical addiction of alcohol, or that impulse to, some stress has entered my life. I need a drink.
Yeah, I would say that.
You were
I need a
headed
drink.
toward that.
Yes.
But I don't think you were. I just don't think you were completely there. There are other people who are the full blown alcoholic, and they need to.
They need to not drink.
Just not drink ever. Just don't. Right.
Yeah.
And they need accountability and all of that. So that's why I'm saying when you said, I don't think that's necessary, it was because in your specific situation, it wasn't.
Right.
But if it had gone on a few more years even,
right,
you may have gotten to that point.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that happened when the girls confronted me, right?
Yep.
To go back to that part of the story, one thing that I lived in absolute dread of was turning into my mom.
Yeah.
And I would say that I never want to turn into my mom. I can't turn into my mom. It was in my head all the time. Don't turn into your mom,
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what they said to me.
Yeah, acting like your mom.
Yeah. And they didn't mean it in a mean way. I think they were trying to warn me.
Right.
They had heard me say it. I don't want to turn into my mom. And then they turn around and what am I doing? Popping pills, drinking alcohol, and just not handling anything.
Yeah.
I was a total mess. So that's what they said to me, and that's one of the things that sent me into total denial and just it wasn't pretty there for a little while. I had to work through that, and I had to come to that realization that that's exactly what was happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So a lot of praying.
Yes, a lot. I mean, God would help me make the connections between this thing and this behavior.
Yeah.
It was, I would just be laying in bed and some incident from my childhood would pop into my head, and then there would be an immediate connection to, well, that's why you react this way to this thing.
Yeah.
And it was just like 2 years of that.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
It's like how long?
It took 2 years, I think.
It took about 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I'd get home from work and greet the kids and you, and we'd be in that house where I could stand on one side of, it was kind of like an island, but it was more of a peninsula in the kitchen, and I would stand on one side and you'd be on the other, and you were telling me this thing again or some new stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where you would really just tell me about these things.
Yeah.
And then on your own with the prayer, you'd go make the connections, and then you had to learn how to respond in a different way instead.
I did.
How'd you figure that out?
I mean, I think I already knew how to respond correctly, but the habits had been so ingrained, so I just had to relearn, how to respond. And also, when we moved down here and getting off the Xanax, it's almost like I had to relearn how to be how to have healthy emotions.
Yes, I remember you.
Because, it's like it deadened me to the point that when I got off of it, if I felt a little, say, anxious or sad or something, I would have to step back and go, is this normal?
Right.
That kind of thing. I'm fine now, you know,
You seem
but
to
that,
be.
but that took me a while, to
Right,
figure
right,
out
right.
what's normal and what's an overreaction or an underreaction,
Yeah.
because I didn't know. I'd been on it for so long that I had no idea,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. All right.
So, but, all of this said, that that situation, it glued our marriage back together in a sense.
Well, I think
We were
yes,
struggling
we
until
were struggling.
all of that happened, and I went back to, I did, I know alcoholics are they like go back to people that they've wronged, and they
Yep.
they try to make amends, and I did do that. You
Okay.
know, I went back to an old friend of mine, and we had a long talk, and then I sat down with my two older girls, and tried to sort things out with them. And I remember sitting down with my oldest daughter, and she was married. They'd been married for a little while, and she said, "Mom, this is awesome. I'm so glad that you're realizing this,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to understand that some trust has been broken, and you've got to earn it back." I remember her saying that to me. I was like, okay, I totally get that.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're great now,
Yeah.
things are fine. She trusts me with her children.
Sure.
She trusted me with her oldest son to teach him how to swim. That's some serious trust.
Yeah. That's true. Okay. So it drew us back together.
Yeah, it did.
Since this is theoretically a marriage podcast. Excuse me. So, and I learned how to listen, which is really all I did,
Right.
and support you.
But you were also like looking up articles on PTSD and things like that.
I did a lot of research on that, just to try to understand where you're coming from, what you were dealing with, because even at that point, I mean, a lot of us, it's like, okay, we started to hear about PTSD, and it was usually just in the context of soldiers coming back from war,
and I even hesitate
and stuff like that.
For that reason, hesitate to attach that label to myself. But
well, there is a thing that some psychologists call childhood PTSD, and it has to do with the trauma.
Yeah.
And so it's not exactly the same as being in the situation of a soldier, but it is still traumatic, especially when you're young.
Right.
And you have, children process things differently, and a lot of pathways get set up in your brain as you're growing up.
Yeah. And
like I said, dealing with stress all the time has been shown to change our brains and all that kind of stuff. And so you'd have to, in the process of dealing with all of that, you had to relearn how to, like you said, how to relearn how to deal with the proper responses to situations, right? So you'd have to learn to step back and not just react, but just kind of figure out what it really was, and teach yourself over time how to respond. So that's why, I mean, it certainly took a number of years. I think the 2 years were the talking and everything else, and then you had to work through. I mean, I think it was. I remember doing the talking, and then we lived in Frederick for 2 to 4 years. So you were still on Xanax during that time, but things were better.
Yeah.
And then we moved to South Carolina, and that's when you started getting off the Xanax, and I had to do some more learning.
Right.
So all we're saying is, it takes time to deal with that kind of baggage.
Yeah.
And to recognize it. So part of this is to say, if you're having issues in your marriage, maybe try to consider what's going on. I mean, if you get angry really quickly, which
Right.
was your
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
or if you get, well, I don't know, anxious really easily, or you're overprotective. I mean, you can be overprotective toward
Yeah.
your kids,
Yeah.
and not let them grow up.
Yeah.
Um,
Recognize it could be a trauma type of
there
response.
could be some sort of response. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And there are maybe many other instances or types of things.
Mm-hmm.
So work it out with your spouse. It's not just women, obviously, it's men too.
Right.
Work it out with your spouse, talk through it, and try to figure it out so
Mhm.
you can deal with that baggage, and don't let the baggage tear your marriage apart
Yeah. Yeah.
and destroy your relationship with your children.
With your yeah. Yeah.
And then finally, I would say, for children who've dealt with parents like this,
Right.
to be cognizant of the changes they've made, and don't be so quick to write them off. And yes, they'll have to earn back trust, just like you did
Mm-hmm.
with our oldest.
Right.
And like I said, we've got two that things aren't so great with.
Right.
But I'm just imploring kids to say, don't tear apart your family when your parents, for instance, in this case, when your parents are making positive changes.
Right. Right.
Because relationships can be restored. I mean, our marriage was not torn apart, but
It's coming unglued for sure.
It's coming unglued,
Yeah.
and we've strengthened it and
Yeah.
pulled it back together. And I think a lot of times when people end their marriage, it's because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They don't realize that they need to make a change. Their spouse needs to make a change. But it can be done, and it's better if you do it,
Right.
rather than just end your marriage. Because as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, and we've talked about divorce, and its devastating effects
Mm-hmm.
on you, your family members, your children.
Right.
Right? It's not just this easy thing. So take the time to work, and the effort to work through.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you have to do to work things out, and you come out stronger in the end.
Right.
And we've talked about, we did a train your dragon, but we've talked about like facing dragons.
Yeah.
Right? If you do that, you're going to come out stronger, even
Right.
though it's a hard thing.
Yeah. So
anything
I'm just,
else you
yeah,
wanted
I
to
just
add?
have one more point because I know
Okay.
we've gone an hour and a half now. Yeah. So, yes, my relationship with my mom and my stepfather was complicated and difficult. But, and you already touched on this, if you're a child and say your parents are not in a great place, or they're there's things going on in your home that you wish that weren't going on, or
Right.
there's a fractured relationship there. There's still, despite everything that went on in my home, it never dawned on me to say, you're a toxic person, I'm never going to speak to you again, and cut them out of my life. And
Okay.
they gave me multiple reasons to do those things exactly.
Yeah.
They did. I tried to allow them to have a relationship with my older children, and it didn't go well. My oldest daughter actually ended up not speaking to them at all for good reasons. She had very good reasons for doing that. And then at that point, I had to put up some barriers between them and my younger children.
Right.
Because it was not the kind of grandparent I wanted them to be interacting with. It was just, it got worse, right? But I still knew that I had an obligation to them. They're my parents. And I knew that, they got sick. We had to take care of them. I was back and forth to Indiana a lot. I would just jump in the car and drive the 10 hours. And I'd stay with my brother and we, do stuff. And then I'd drive the 10 hours. I did it a lot, and I still called my mom, not knowing if she was going to be drunk or high or both, or angry or crying or whatever it was.
Yep.
I still had to do it because she's my mom. And that the fifth commandment, it means something. It's not just a throwaway, The last 5 commandments, that's what all of our laws are based on, right? Don't kill, don't steal, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But the first, like the 5th commandment is honor your mother and father, and I took that very seriously. And it changed over the years because our relationship changed with them, right? But I still had to do it. It didn't matter how they treated me, or as long as I could protect my children from them, I still had an obligation to them. So I think that's an important thing to remember when you're dealing with toxic parents, so to speak,
And I think I've heard this a number of times in things I've listened to where people will say your family is who you choose, not necessarily your blood.
Right.
And it's like, well, I think in some situations, extreme situations,
right,
sure, you may get to that point. But I think today people are too quick.
Yes.
Right? Because they just don't want to deal with it, rather. So it's another one of those things where, you throw away the growth you could have.
Right.
And I'm not saying allow them to manipulate you or allow them to destroy your life. I mean, that's what you were talking about with
right.
You put up boundaries.
Yeah.
With your mom.
I had to.
So that she couldn't negatively affect your life, but you would still call her, and there was always that hope that she would become the grandparent you wanted her to become.
Yeah.
Right. In that
become
sense.
Sherry, basically.
Or become at least
your mom,
Yeah. But at least take steps in the positive direction, for her own health and for relationship with you and your brothers and so on. And even though she never did it, you still honored her.
Yeah.
And then, so I think people just do it too quickly.
I do too.
Right.
And they're making me unhappy, therefore I don't want anything to do with them, kind of.
Or they refuse to notice or to see the positive when the positive is there to, or changes are being made. So like you said, your relationship with our oldest is great now, even though she had stopped really relating to you for a time.
Yeah. Right.
She recognized that, and you earned the trust back, and you have a great relationship. So I'm really, it's not just about marriage, right? It's a marriage is a family, and then you're adding kids into the already existing family. So, and then, so while we're talking about marriage, but we're also talking about just the extension of family and the effects of your marriage and so on. I don't think I have anything else. Do you?
No, I think we've covered it rather thoroughly. This is one of our longer podcasts. Yeah.
All right, then we'll sign off and try to think of some other stuff to talk about. But we really do want to hear if you've got questions or your own stories.
Or feedback,
Or feedback, definitely. Yeah. Or topics you'd like us to cover. Send us an email at marriageonthehalfshell@gmail.com. That's the best way to get hold of us.
Okay.
And then we'll take a look at those, and who knows? If you tell us a story about your experience, tell us whether to keep it private or whether you'd like, if you'd like us to talk about a success story that you've had.
Right.
Also, so we're always open to that too. So marriageonthehalfshell@gmail.com, and like and subscribe or whatever, however it works on podcast platforms.
Right. We are on YouTube now, I believe, right?
We've been on YouTube, yeah.
Yep. YouTube, Spotify,
Apple Podcasts, Google, some others.
Okay.
So that's it.
Okay. Have a nice evening, y'all.
This has been Marriage on the Half Shell.